Kim, you mentioned that you're back in Canada now, and then you also have your PR in Australia. And so you're OT. So your experience will be specific to OT, but I imagine there'll be some similarities in some senses of your experience coming back to Canada. And then also your experience working for, I think you worked for a little while in Australia, did you?
Yeah, 2.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us a bit more about that experience? So, coming out of your program, working in Australia, and then coming back to Canada as well, and what that process was like.
Yeah, so I mean, well, it feels like it's a while ago, but it was just kind of during COVID. So at the time, it didn't really make sense for me to like jump right back and go back to Vancouver when things were really unsettling. So it made sense to stay there and work a little bit until while I kind of, well, some of my friends decided to like come back to Canada and then do the whole process once they're back in Canada. I decided to stay in Australia, work there, and while I was working, I was able to get the process started to start my licensing. And I guess something for other future students to know is that it does take a while. In Canada, there's generally a fairly lengthy process to check your credentials and examinations to make sure you're, I guess, appropriate and have all the knowledge you need. So for my program, it took about a year from starting it to the end to finish. And I think that's kind of on par with other professions as well, like physio and so forth. So yeah, it took about a year. It's a lot of like checking your coursework, different types of exams to check your clinical reasoning, and then also like the national exam. One tip I would say for students who are thinking of going in or currently studying is to make sure you're really organized with your course syllabus, because they do ask you to submit all of your different courses, and if you weren't as organized you would take a little longer like I did. So highly recommend that part. And then yeah, once that's done, that part is probably the hardest part, like doing all the exams. And the exams, depending on what profession you're in, it only occurs maybe like once or twice a year. For me, it was twice a year. So making sure when you're planning it, plan it ahead of time and know what kind of time frame you're trying to finish things by, because otherwise you might end up a whole 6 months before like the next time they offer the exam. And then yeah, once that process is done, it's pretty easy. You then have to pay a whole lot of, not a whole lot, but just another big fee for like the licensing. But that's kind of done. And then yeah, and then you'll have the autonomy to work in Canada and Australia. So yeah, that's part of the reason why I did that. And for Australia, it's pretty straightforward. Once you graduate there, you just have to pay for the APRA, so it's super easy. Yeah, and then for the PR part, I hadn't at the time I hadn't decided that I wanted a PR yet, so I came back and worked for about 2 years. And as I was working here, I just kind of started missing Australia, so I was like, why not? So then, fortunately, I was able to kind of do all the steps to get the PR without being in Australia. So yeah.
That's so interesting in that. So that opening up those both doors for you and getting that PR while you're back in Canada, you went through that process and now you're thinking of heading back again. That's really interesting. I love that.
Yeah, well, again, decisive. But at least I feel like I have some choices now. I can live in both countries easily. I can work in both countries easily wherever it kind of takes me. I have those choices, which I think that's quite fortunate to be able to do that. So yeah.